You're listening to the Lifestyle You podcast, where we help you achieve a realistic and human approach to health and fitness by working with your body and not against it. My name is Jenna Altman, and my mission is to help you, the active woman, find a healthy lifestyle that you can consistently show up for and make decisions that align with you and your body. Today's episode, we are going to dive into what is reverse dieting and how do you know if you need one. Reverse dieting ensures that you're getting enough food for your body and optimizing metabolic function, which actually allows us to directly work with our body, which is the mission of this podcast. Today's guest is Brandy Schroeder, and she is a client-centered lifestyle and nutrition coach that believes every person has value, even when they might not have identified it themselves. And what's really cool about Brandy is her expertise really does focus around reverse dieting. So I am so excited to have her here today. If you're someone who's struggling to lose the last 5 to 10 pounds, maybe even this has been something you've been struggling with for years, or you're feeling like your diet is hard to stick with, or you're just kind of lacking energy in general and want to start feeling better, this episode is for you. You might be surprised to know that the Eat Less, Move More campaign might not always apply to your unique situation. So today we're going to cover what is reverse dieting, what are the signs and symptoms that you might need a reverse diet, and what should you expect as far as results go in a reverse diet. Let's dive on in. We are here with Coach B of Motivate and Be Fit, and we love to jump right into the good stuff. So Brandy or Coach B, let's start with your background on reverse dieting and actually your own experience with that.
Okay, so reverse dieting for me, I came across it when I was finishing off my very last show. I'd been dieting from 2011 to 2014. In 2013, before I started prepping for what was like my last two shows, I had come across Layne Norton and I really wanted to see if it would work for myself. And so I had an amazing contest prep coach, but we never really talked about reverse dieting, but I had said to him, I don't want to rebound. And so for me, it was really like, what do I need to do to prevent that? And my brain back then was like, reverse dieting is the key, right? It's going to prevent me from gaining all this weight. And so I tried it and I did do a reverse on my own for my shows. I was about 140 pounds and I would get down to about 114. So for me, reverse dieting was the way out of some of these adaptations. And it was also a way in which I could rebuild my relationship with food. I didn't realize it at that time. My thought was like, I want to stay, I don't want to rebound and I want to stay leaner because I want to maintain this work. And there's got to be a way out of here. Like, why do we do all this, like get shred season to then rebound and gain all this weight back? And so I worked really hard. I did 4 years of back-to-back dieting, like legit. And I did a reverse diet for almost an entire year. Now, if I knew then what I know now, I would have done a recovery diet to get out sooner than later. But I didn't know that. So I did do the smaller increment and I definitely remain a leaner individual. I'm nowhere near where I was, where my body liked to stay, which for me, my average weight in my off season was 135 to 140. But that was also when I had such a shitty relationship with food that like I was that person who ate clean and would have cheat meals all the time. But the reverse diet for me worked. And then it just kind of like evolved from there. Like it really gave me the time to rebuild my relationship with food. It really helped me understand what was going on with my body. Eventually I got my period back. It got me into a better place to even fuel my body for CrossFit because I stopped bodybuilding and then I went into CrossFit. And I'm just like, how do I teach myself to eat more without freaking out? It took me quite a few years after that to even get out from underneath the whole fear around food. So that was my introduction to reverse dieting and I was successful with it. I've been successfully maintaining my physique because of my reverse diet and getting my maintenance calories and my energy expenditure back up. I'm a 125 pound individual and I probably on average eat anywhere between 1900 to 2300 calories and I'm cool. Right. So, but the old me would never have been able to do that. I would have been like 1200 calories because that's the only way, or 1500 calories even, because I'm a small human. And the assumption is the smaller you are, like the less calories you eat. And that is not true. I mean, especially with the type of energy expenditure and training I do. So learning to fuel my body was the biggest thing, and to never diet again.
Yeah, for sure. Some people listening to this podcast might be like, I don't know what reverse dieting is at all, or maybe have never heard of it. So if you could summarize for us what it is and who needs a reverse diet.
Yeah, so I'm going to be specific because there's two categories, in my opinion. So recovery diet is something where I would leave that to the competitors, the get shred season, like people who are on uber lean, low body fat levels that are basically getting ready for shows. But some people still do a reverse. But the reverse diet is basically a method of slowly and controlling, okay, and increasing your calories to basically improve your energy expenditure, right? Because when you have your metabolic adaptations, your energy expenditure is lower. So we want to bring that back up. And while we do this, it will help limit fat regain. Okay, so that's the intention. The goal is to get your calories back up to a more sustainable value of maintenance, right? And you can do that while minimizing fat gain.
I was going to say that one of the first things that I do with most clients who come to me, even if they have a fat loss goal, is we do go through a reverse diet initially. And I'm curious if that's something that you do with most of your clients in the beginning as well.
Yeah, so in most cases, I like to call it the diet before the diet. So these are the people that are, weight loss is not achieved, right? But they're eating low calories and they're just simply not sustainable. So they're the people that are typically like probably yo-yo dieting more than anything else, right? Because they're eating low calories, but they're not seeing results. And then they're like maybe even overeating on the weekends and stuff like that, right? So if we do the diet before the diet, it's essentially just ramping up the calories, but it's not to put you in a better position to diet in the future, metabolically speaking. It is a great opportunity to now embark on a lot of these habits, behaviors that are required for your diet phase. Because if you can't manage tracking your intake, like understanding how much protein is sufficient for you, or if you can't at least even eat nutrient-dense foods most of the time with higher fiber, then good luck in your diet phase. So the diet before the diet is like teaching women to eat more calories, show them that, hey, guess what? You're not going to gain weight simply by eating more food. And then I do think that it's great for athletes that are looking to come back up and look at performance, maybe put on some muscle. Again, a reverse diet's great because we can minimize fat regain. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I think this is why we're talking about it today, right? Because it seems like a lot of women probably understand the diet phase, right? They know that really well. They've maybe been doing that a majority of their lives or some version of that. And so it's important. I love that you brought up the nutrition periodization, right? So that way there are 3 different phases, right? We have our diet phase, we have our reverse dieting phase, which we were talking all about today. Then we also have our maintenance phase where you're just kind of hanging out at your maintenance calories, which is eventually where you get to through your reverse diet. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion because, again, people don't know that it has to be kind of periodized. Or you can also just hang out at maintenance forever if you're happy with your body composition and all the things going on and how your body is responding. One thing that's coming to my mind that I feel like people are probably wondering is how in the world can I eat more and this will help me reach my goals? You've mentioned this a couple times already, but I want to make it really clear for our people listening what metabolic adaptation is. And that's kind of what this concept is sharing here.
Yeah, so for sure, like the thing about metabolic adaptations, and just to make it very easy to understand, metabolic adaptations are just simply your body's response to the stimuli to diet. So the energy coming in, your body is going to have a response with the energy expenditure. So an example of that would be like when we go into a lower calorie deficit, you might experience hunger, right? What do I do about it? Okay, well, it's the cost of getting lean. It's your body saying, hold on a second here, you're eating less than what, you should be, and we need to do something about it. So we're just going to crank up your hunger. And we have to be able to respond to that. But eventually, guess what happens? That hunger will start to go down because if you stay the course, you're tracking your macros, you're losing your body fat, you're becoming a smaller human, your body's going to adapt. And now you're at your new maintenance calories. And then you take calories away and then boom, again. So every single time we make these changes, there's going to be an adaptive process. And everyone is different. So the people that tend to not be able to gain weight, they may not even see adaptations on the way down. They might be the people that don't struggle with fat loss, whatever. But then you have the people that will say to you, Jenna, oh, if I look at a bagel, I gain body fat. Okay, so those are the people that will struggle because their body is going to be constantly adapting maybe, right? And so we have to look at like, how can we offset some of this stuff? And on the way down, maybe your calories do get super low and you're still not hitting your fat loss targets. So having those adaptations occur, we might want to bring ourselves up, take a diet break, set back at maintenance. Maybe your maintenance is like 4 weeks, 8 weeks, who knows? And then we begin the dieting process again. But if you understand that maintenance is okay and that we can actually, eat more food and get better results, it gives you the time to also figure out the habits and the behaviors that also need to line up. Because I can almost guarantee you, reverse dieting is not magic. It's not going to prevent you from gaining body fat. In fact, you probably will gain a few pounds. But at the end of the day, it's a great time to learn how to eat better, more food, and understand what fuel can do for you when you do have an abundance.
Yeah, totally. And I love, you touched on a few things that I want to highlight. So when we're thinking about our body, and we might get angry at our body for not responding to the fat loss or making those adaptations faster than we'd like in either direction. And I think it's really important to recognize that your body is just trying to help you. Your body's trying to regulate itself, and it's not trying to work against you. It's trying to help you and save you because it thinks it's in danger. And I think when we can understand that, we can have more respect for our body and the processes that it's going through. And then another thing that I've noticed before with clients is when we are going through the reverse diet, a lot of people who maybe are eating like 1,500 calories at first, we start bumping them up to like 1,700 calories. I do see a lot of clients who struggle with that adaptation going upward because their hunger cues are non-existent. They're like, Jenna, I'm so full on the way up, right? And I think that comes back to this metabolic adaptation. And I always tell people, I'm like, give it a couple of weeks and your body will start to understand what's happening and it will play along. Have you seen that happen with clients too?
Well, I think it's going to be dependent. So like when we're doing a reverse diet, the intention, like I said before, is to improve your total daily energy expenditure, right? So every time you're eating, we're hoping that energy expenditure goes back up. Your needs and everything is going to start to ramp up. So for some people, yeah, you might feel hungrier because your energy expenditure is going up. For a lot of women, it's just the chronic dieting syndrome, their beliefs, their thoughts around food. So if you have a client that's struggling with eating more, we have to look at the protein intake. They're probably eating way more protein than actually is required at this point in time. Number one. And number two is how often they're eating and how they're separating those foods. Because again, they're so used to eating these big ass salads that they're trying to eat these big ass salads while still trying to eat 2 more pieces of fruit and another full meal, right? This is what reverse dieting does. It helps us understand that what we were doing maybe is not the ideal situation and that we need to learn how to eat again. And so if hunger is not there, it's looking at what you're doing with your food intake. I don't like anybody to force feed. In most cases, it has everything to do with the fact that they're so used to being so fucking hungry, they need to eat every 2 hours. That's not how it works when you're starting to eat more food, because you're going to be full. Reduce the fiber or the volume-based foods. You can still have high fiber, but you don't need to be eating all the salads. And also, one other thing. What I noticed for people when we do the diet before the diet and you're trying to help them, it is the mindset around food and that fear. So that drives it for sure. So their assumptions are they're not hungry. So they're not listening to their cues at all. Like nothing's changed in their lifestyle. They're still doing all that. But they also are drinking a ton of water because that's always been part of their protocol, that they need to drink more water because that's somehow going to ignite the fat loss. That's not the case. And so you got to look at your whole daily consumption of everything. If you've been living off of diet soda because you've been hungry most of your freaking life and we're trying to teach you how to eat food, you got to reduce the carbonated drinks. Not that they're bad, but you're full all the time. So there are a lot of things that you can do differently for sure that will help with the reverse diet. But I truly do believe it has a lot to do with past dieting experiences and what has been laid out. And then along with the mindset that they're still so scared. If you're afraid to eat that bagel, yet we're asking you to eat more carbohydrates and you don't know how to do it, you're not going to be hungry. And that's just my philosophy. That is not science. It's just what I see. It's what I hear from coaching hundreds of women.
That makes a lot of sense, though. And I'm glad that you tied the last element of the mindset in there, too, because I think a lot of women do have that limiting belief, which is preventing them from being successful in a reverse diet and actually sticking with it. And I will bring the concept of like, if you do want to diet in the future, like you're going to have to get all of this in a good place first, the habits, the foundation, the diet before the diet. And I tend to like utilize that as like a thing that keeps pulling them along, right? Because they're just like, well, I want to lose weight. Well, I want to lose weight. And so I love just how you've kind of reframed this concept. And I think that I can definitely utilize a lot of this with clients as well to help them realize all of the things that are at work here and are at play.
I wanted to add, you also have to be really honest with yourself as the client as to what you do plan to do. Because if you tell your coach, well, I'm in the gym 5 days a week and I'm doing this, this, and this, we're predicting those maintenance calories based on your feedback. But if you're not following through with that, it's not going to turn out. And the other thing is this, you need to monitor your reverse diet. It is just as important, if not more important, to monitor your reverse diet than it is to in the dieting phase, because we want to see what's working. If you're gaining weight and this can happen. So you can go along the reverse diet and not 1 pound is gained, like no inches are changing. And then boom, in week 6, you gain 3 pounds and an inch. It can happen that way, right? So we have to figure out what has been happening. Like, how consistent have you been? Have you been tracking everything? Or did you overeat on the weekend? Because we're trying to do a reverse diet. We're trying to slowly increment. And if they're not being honest with hunger and all this kind of stuff, it can start to add up. We have your feedback as a client, and that is it.
Yep. And I think that's why, it's so important to be paying attention and tracking these things. And especially if you're somebody who's listening to this and you have been on a reverse diet by yourself, or you're considering doing it by yourself, all the more that you are very much paying attention to all these different variables. One thing that I love to tell clients too, the calculator is not going to give you exactly what you need to know, right? And it's always going to be a ballpark, because your maintenance calories are always going to be changing. It's not a fixed set number. Like, I heard somebody ask me, I just want somebody to set my macros for me. I'm like, but you do know that they're going to change over time and change as your training changes, as your life changes, as your stress changes, all these different variables. So just a word of caution with utilizing those macro calculators online, because they definitely can be dangerous for some people. But I also love that, this also leads us back to this concept of listening to your body, right? So what is your body trying to communicate with you as you are going through that reverse diet? And how can we pay attention to that? And this is exactly what I wanted to chat about next. But something that we really emphasize at the Lifestyle You podcast is this concept of working with your body and not against it. And so I would love to hear from your perspective how we can allow reverse dieting or utilize reverse dieting to work with our body.
Yeah. So to give you a little bit of background, because this will answer the question, is that the reason why I did the reverse diet was because of where I was with my body and not listening to it. So I ignored my symptoms. I was working 100% against my body, trying to pursue a level of leanness that is just not sustainable. So with the reverse diet, and what I leaned into is understanding how food is the nourishment for everything that I can encompass in MBF, and that's mind, body, fitness. So for me, I needed to have a better relationship with food, and the reverse diet allowed me to lean into that absolute discomfort around eating carbohydrates, all the foods that I once told myself and my clients they could not have. With my body, it's sad to think about what I put my body through, so I ignored it. But the reverse diet allowed me to lean into that a little bit and say, okay, because here's my fears. Okay, so if I start getting my period back, I'm going to probably go through those cycles of bloat and fatness and all this. Those were real thoughts. I was afraid that my own natural cycle that happens as a woman every month was going to somehow change the level of leanness, which is not true. So I had to work through a lot of that. So again, mind and body. And then with the fitness, do you know how beneficial food is to execute in the gym the way you want to go for a walk with your kids, to play in the park, to even just function? And I'm sure women can relate to this, but they don't want to admit it. My libido was in the tank, being as lean as I was and is so focused on food. I didn't even care about sex. I loved my husband, but I'm just are you kidding me? That's where I was. And again, the reverse diet gave me permission to eat food to nourish my body. I focused on being strong. That's it. That's all I could say, and that in fitness is what got me through this. And now I look back and think, man, that reverse diet, it's the best thing that I ever did for myself. And why I think if you want to prep yourself for a fat loss phase, even a weight gain phase, try to put on muscle, I think it's really important to try and really lean into the diet before the diet. Understand what it means to fuel your body, to eat carbohydrates, to enjoy food, to navigate eating out with your family and not worry about shit. That's part of it. And that to me is absolutely you're working with your body now. You're not working against it, because I've seen what working against your body does.
Yeah. I have not quite as extreme of a story, but a similar experience. And I can also say that reverse dieting was not only what saved me and my body, but also what got me into coaching. I was
Mm.
fascinated. I was like, oh my goodness, what is this concept? And I want to just learn all about this and help other people work through this. And I think I always ask myself that question too. I wonder, how did I live like this? Like, how did I get up in the morning? How did I have energy to do anything? And I think the answer is I didn't, and I just kind of showed up, walked through life, and was just not having a good time with my life. And my husband and I always have this conversation, and I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, how can people like live like this without all this energy? And he's like, Jenna, they don't know any better. And I'm like, that is so true. Because you didn't know any better, right? You had this low energy, these awful symptoms, and it was just part of the process. And especially in the competition world, I imagine that's very much part of the process.
It is part of the process and you have to buy into it. This is what you're signing up for when you're doing extreme dieting. Like if you want to do things like bodybuilding, that's fine. I'll find you a coach that's reliable and somebody that I trust. But I want you to understand what you're signing up for. And it's going to look different for everybody, but I mean, I knew what to expect because in 1999 I'd already dieted, but I had the worst coaches back then. Like I've never dieted so hard in my life. Back then you didn't have condiments, you didn't have cheat meals, you didn't have any of that shit. Like you couldn't put salt on anything. It was terrible. Like there was no fruit ever to be on a plate. Whereas the next time, my coach and I, we sat down and he just said, remember, Brandy, you're dieting for a show. So these are the expectations. But he didn't have to go through it all with me, whereas I would say that to that person. So yeah, the person who's signing up for certain situations in terms like when you do intentional dieting, you have to be okay and accepting of um, the byproduct, right? The symptoms, because they are like, it's a response to the stimuli of what's being served to you. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, Jenna. People are so wrapped up in dieting for so long that they just think it's normal. And it's amazing when I hear a client say, oh, I just have so much more energy eating food. They stop actually even focusing on the fact that they haven't gained any weight or their inches haven't changed. They're just like so floored that they can lift more weight in the gym or that they're playing with their kids now. Like they're showing up for their friends and family. They're not saying no anymore. And they're not thinking about food. Like, gosh, we didn't even talk about that. Like when you start a reverse, it's not really about putting yourself in a better position to diet metabolically speaking. I think it's more than that. It's like learning to eat food without having to think about food 24/7. Right? Like, yeah, you might have to plan a little bit
Yep.
in the beginning because you've got to lean into that discomfort, but you don't have to be so like bogged down with like, oh my God, what am I going to do when I go out for dinner with my friends? Like, I know they're going to have pizza. Eat the damn pizza because we're moving towards maintenance, girl. Like, let's do it, and let's teach you how to include these foods. You've been told so long how to ignore them and to restrict them and, eliminate them. We want to teach you how to incorporate these, right? I think one of the best places to put a reverse diet is somebody who's done keto. So you see the rebounds with keto because in most cases, it's just not sustainable. And yes, it's the caloric value, but it's the calories that are wrapped into the carbohydrates that you can't stop eating. And, with the body weight, it's because of so much glycogen and sodium and everything that comes with it. Like the hyperpalatable foods that you've been telling yourself you can't have throughout the process of keto. Sure, you saw those results happen, but now how do you maintain them? Eating no carbs? Is that realistic? So reverse diet is really good for that. I've seen it happen, teaching women how to lean into eating more fruit and, having a slice of cake and not worrying about it, I think is important. And those type of diets teach you the opposite, right? So inclusively eating is another fantastic result of reverse dieting.
Yeah, you mentioned my favorite one and one that was extremely impactful for my life too, which was just, being able to have that food freedom, that flexible dieting approach and not, being so bogged down about the worries and the
Mm-hmm.
preoccupation that came and the mental headspace that my head was in 24/7 around food. And that was for me definitely the biggest impact in my life, as well as the increased energy. And I even the first reverse diet I ever went through, I did see some cool body composition changes, but that was nothing compared to the relief that I had of stress over food and what that did for the people closest to me.
Right.
So I love that. I love to dive into our food for thought segment next, which is basically just you summarizing something from today's episode, one takeaway, one tangible thing that people can take with them. What would that be?
I just really think that it's important to understand the purpose of what you're doing. And I think that if there's anything that the reverse diet and or this topic can teach you, is that don't assume that it's some sort of magic solution to what could be your deep underlying issue. Because even with the reverse diet, and I didn't talk a lot about it, but when it comes to the mindset, like there's a reason why you were a chronic dieter before. There's a reason why that you are who you are today. Like you're a byproduct of the choices that you're making. So don't assume that any diet, including the reverse diet, will fix that. Give yourself the time and the patience to work through the stuff. And if there's one thing the reverse diet does, is it will allow you that time if you are patient. So a few things. Figure out where you are right now. Figure out where you are in terms of like your calories and where you need to be in terms of like satiety and, sustainability, and how patient are you willing to be in the process. And just make sure you don't assume that it's some kind of magic pill or magic diet, because it's not. It still requires a lot of work and understanding.
Love that. Awesome. What a great note to end us on. Before we tune out for today, I would love to just leave a trail behind for where our listeners can find you. So if you could drop that here, and then we'll make sure that it's also in the show notes so people can click on it.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much known as Coach B. I'm the CEO and founder of Motivate and Be Fit. So you'll find me on Instagram. That is pretty much my stomping grounds. But I'm Motivate Be Fit across all platforms. So you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on my website, as well as Pinterest. I'm everywhere.
Love it. Love it. And Brandy also has a podcast as well that I was on, which is
More Than Macros
Radio.
How did I forget that?
I'd shout that out.
You know what? It's so funny because I think you and I talked about that even on my podcast. I'm like, oh, it's such I love it. It's the best. It's one of the best things that I always wanted to do it. So here we are, podcasters, and I didn't even mention it. But yes, More Than Macros Radio. It's one of my favorite places as well. And it's just easy conversations. So join me there.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brandy. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you for listening to the Lifestyle You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating and review to help others discover the magic we're creating together. If there's someone in your life who could benefit from listening to this episode, be sure to forward it along to them. You can also follow me on Instagram at Jenna Ray Altman for more helpful content, resources, and good vibes. As always, thank you so much for being here.